In World War II, most soldiers still fought with rifles designed for another century. Slow, heavy, one shot at a time. But somewhere between the beaches of Normandy and the frozen hills of Korea, a different sound echoed across the battlefield. Faster, relentless, unforgiving. American infantry carried a rifle many thought was too heavy, too old-fashioned, already outdated by newer designs. And yet, when the fighting got brutal, when survival depended on speed, this old weapon kept proving everyone wrong. Enemy soldiers feared it. Commanders trusted it. And decades after its debut, it was still showing up where wars were hardest to win. An antique that refused to die. A relic that kept outpacing modern ideas. So, how did a rifle built before World War II continue dominating battlefields long after it should have disappeared? And why did the men who carried it call it one of the greatest fighting tools ever made? For generations, war moved at the speed of a bolt being pulled back. Across Europe and Asia, soldiers carried rifles built on the same old idea. Fire once, work the bolt, aim again, repeat. It was a rhythm every army understood. Slow, controlled, deliberate. German infantry relied on the Mauser. Japanese troops marched with the Arisaka. Soviet soldiers gripped the Mosin Nagant. Different nations, but the same philosophy. Accuracy over speed. Discipline over volume. Battles were often decided by patience, by who could hold a position longer, who could reload faster under pressure, who could stay calm while cycling that heavy bolt again and again. And for decades, no one questioned it. Military leaders believed that too much firepower in a single soldier's hands could waste ammunition or destroy battlefield order. A rifleman was meant to fire carefully, not endlessly, but there was a problem hiding beneath that tradition. When combat became chaotic, in forests, in cities, in sudden ambushes, the time it took to chamber the next round could mean the difference between survival and silence. Every shot created a pause. Every pause created vulnerability. Most armies accepted this as the cost of war, except one. While the world held tightly to old doctrines, the United States began searching for something different, something faster, something that could change the rhythm of combat itself. And quietly, in the background, a new kind of rifle was waiting to step onto the battlefield. While most armies doubled down on tradition, one engineer refused to accept the limits of the old battlefield rhythm. His name was John Garand. Working quietly at Springfield Armory, he pursued an idea many believed was unrealistic, a rifle that could fire again and again, without forcing the soldier to manually cycle the bolt every time. It sounded revolutionary, but it also sounded dangerous. The design was powerful, but it was heavier than standard rifles. It promised speed, but it required complex engineering. It could change infantry tactics forever, but no one knew if it would survive the mud, the cold, or the chaos of real war. Military leaders hesitated. A semi-automatic rifle meant more ammunition spent, more moving parts, more chances for failure, and yet the potential was impossible to ignore. Instead of firing once and pausing, a soldier could maintain pressure on the enemy. Instead of waiting to chamber another round, momentum could be sustained. It was a radical shift in philosophy. Careful, controlled fire had defined infantry combat for decades. But this new rifle suggested something different: speed as survival. Many doubted it would work outside a testing range. Many believed it was too advanced for the average soldier. Therefore, adopting it meant more than introducing a new weapon. It meant rewriting how an entire army fought. And as tensions around the world began to rise, the United States made a decision that would soon echo across battlefields everywhere. They chose the impossible rifle. When World War II erupted, the impossible rifle was no longer an experiment. It was in the hands of American soldiers, stepping into the largest conflict the world had ever seen. On the beaches of Normandy, waves crashed against steel and sandbags, gunfire tore through the air, and amid the chaos, U.S. infantrymen fired faster than many enemies had ever witnessed. One shot, then another, without the pause of a bolt being pulled back. German soldiers, trained around precise bolt-action fire, suddenly faced a wall of rapid shots that felt almost automatic. The rhythm of battle had changed. In the forests of Europe, patrols moved cautiously through narrow paths. Ambushes were decided in seconds, but the soldier carrying a semi-automatic rifle could respond instantly, firing multiple rounds before an opponent could even chamber the next shot. Across the Pacific, the story repeated itself. Dense jungles, close-range encounters, moments where speed meant survival. Japanese troops often relied on discipline and timing, but the American riflemen could maintain pressure, forcing enemies to stay down instead of advancing. It wasn't just a technical advantage, it was a psychological shock. Enemy soldiers began to realize that a single American infantryman could produce the volume of fire they expected from an entire squad. And yet, the rifle wasn't perfect. Its weight slowed long marches. Its 8-round clip demanded awareness during reloads. But when combat turned brutal, when distance closed and adrenaline took over, the benefits outweighed every flaw. Our commanders noticed something changing on the battlefield. Small units held ground longer. Assaults moved with more confidence. Defensive lines became harder to break. Therefore, what began as a risky innovation quickly turned into a defining advantage. The rifle that many doubted was now shaping the outcome of real battles. And with every engagement, from Europe's shattered cities to the islands of the Pacific, the M1 Garand was no longer just a new weapon. It was becoming a legend. But every legend carries its weaknesses. As the war dragged on, soldiers began to notice the limits of the rifle they had come to trust. Yes, it fired faster than bolt-action weapons, but it wasn't perfect. The M1 Garand used an 8-round en-bloc clip, 8 shots, and then a forced reload. In long engagements, that limitation mattered. A soldier had to stay aware of every round fired, listening for the metallic ping that signaled an empty rifle. Some believed that sound could give away their position. Whether myth or reality, the doubt spread. And then there was the weight. Compared to many rifles of its time, the Garand felt heavy on long marches. Across muddy fields and steep hills, every extra pound drained energy from already exhausted troops. Maintenance added another layer of concern. The rifle was advanced, but advanced meant more parts to care for, more attention, more training. As new weapon concepts began to appear near the end of the war, some critics started to whisper that the Garand might already be falling behind. Lighter designs, higher capacity, faster reload systems. Therefore, a question slowly formed among military planners. Had the rifle reached its peak too early? What once felt revolutionary now risked becoming outdated. And as the world moved toward a new kind of conflict, many believed the era of the Garand was quietly coming to an end. Just as many believed the rifle story was fading. A new war began in a place far colder, far harsher than the battlefields of Europe, Korea. Mountains covered in snow, winds that cut through uniforms and froze metal to bare skin. A conflict fought in silence, fog, and sudden violence. Here, modern ideas met brutal reality. Some newer weapons promised lighter weight and faster reloads. But extreme cold exposed every weakness. Mechanisms froze. Lubricants thickened. Reliability became more valuable than innovation. And once again, the old rifle stepped forward. The M1 Garand, heavy and familiar, continued to fire when conditions turned unforgiving. Its powerful cartridge carried across valleys and ridgelines, reaching enemies at distances where lighter weapons struggled. American soldiers climbed icy slopes, a breath visible in the air. Rifles pressed tightly against their shoulders as firefights erupted without warning. In these moments, speed still mattered, but trust mattered more. A weapon that worked every time became a lifeline. Enemy forces often relied on numbers and surprise, but disciplined volleys from Garand-equipped units held defensive lines longer than expected. What had once seemed outdated suddenly felt essential. The same weight that slowed marches helped steady aim in harsh winds. The same design critics doubted proved resistant to freezing conditions. Therefore, in a war defined by endurance rather than spectacle, the rifle many believed was nearing retirement found a second life, not as a relic of the past, but as a survivor, refusing to fade when the world thought it already should have. But even as the rifle proved itself again in Korea, the world around it was changing faster than ever before. New weapons began to appear on the horizon: detachable magazines, selective fire, lighter frames designed for a new style of warfare. Military thinkers started to shift their philosophy. Future battles, they believed, would be faster, more mobile, built around automatic fire rather than precision power. Compared to these new designs, the Garand suddenly looked old. 8 rounds felt limited. Its weight felt excessive, and the distinctive clip system no longer represented the future many engineers imagined. Younger soldiers trained with newer platforms began asking the same question that echoed through command rooms and testing grounds. Was this legendary rifle finally reaching the end of its journey? After all, it had already fought through a world war. It had survived brutal winters and endless marches. But progress never stops. And as prototypes replaced tradition, as armies searched for the next evolution of infantry weapons, one doubt remained at the center of it all. Was this the end of the rifle that had once dominated an entire world war? And yet, despite all the predictions of its decline, the M1 Garand never truly disappeared, because its survival was never an accident. It was the result of 3 powerful truths that only became clear with time. First, it was a weapon built ahead of its era. When most armies still trusted bolt-action rifles, the Garand gave every American infantryman semi-automatic firepower. Not a special unit, not a rare prototype. An entire army moving with a faster rhythm than its enemies. What once seemed excessive became the new standard. Second, its reliability bordered on legendary. Newer designs promised innovation, but innovation often struggled in mud, snow, and exhaustion. The Garand was heavy. Yes, complex sometimes. But it worked in frozen mountains, in humid jungles, in the chaos of sudden firefights. Their soldiers trusted it because it fired when they needed it most, not just in perfect conditions, but in the worst moments of war. And finally, it wasn't only about the rifle itself. It was about how it fit into American military doctrine. U.S. infantry tactics evolved around aggressive movement and sustained individual firepower. Instead of relying only on machine guns for suppression, every rifleman became a source of pressure. Therefore, the Garand was never just a piece of equipment. It was part of a larger philosophy, a belief that speed, reliability, and initiative could reshape the battlefield. New weapons would eventually replace it. That much was inevitable. But replacement didn't erase its impact, because by the time the world moved forward, the ideas behind the Garand had already changed modern warfare forever. By the time newer rifles began to take its place, the M1 Garand had already carved its identity into history. Many soldiers didn't remember it as just another piece of equipment. They remembered it as a companion that carried them through chaos, through noise, through moments where survival depended on a single, reliable shot. General George S. Patton once called it the greatest battle implement ever devised, and for countless infantrymen, that wasn't exaggeration. It was experience. The rifle eventually evolved into something new. Engineers took what worked, refined it, and pushed forward toward the future. That path would lead to the M14, a weapon shaped by the same philosophy but built for a changing era. Yet the Garand's real legacy wasn't only mechanical. It changed how armies thought about the individual soldier. It proved that speed and firepower didn't belong only to machine guns or specialized units. One rifleman, properly equipped, could influence the outcome of a fight. Long after it left the front lines, its presence remained visible in training fields, ceremonial units, and the memories of those who carried it. Not as a relic of a forgotten war, but as a turning point. A reminder that sometimes the weapons labeled outdated are the ones that redefine the future. In the end, the M1 Garand didn't survive because it was perfect. It survived because, when war demanded more, it delivered more. Through the beaches of World War II, through the frozen mountains of Korea, through doubt, evolution, and change, it refused to disappear. What once looked heavy became dependable. What once felt outdated became essential. New rifles came, new doctrines replaced old ones. But the idea behind the Garand, speed, reliability, and confidence in the individual soldier, never truly left the battlefield. Today, it may stand behind glass carried in ceremonies instead of combat. Yet its echo still lives in every modern infantry rifle, because sometimes the weapons history calls obsolete are the ones that were simply ahead of their time.